Hey guys, I'm Lauren Skay, and this is the Zen Blonde podcast. I'm so excited to have you guys here. It's been a long time coming. I've had a lot of people ask me to do a podcast. I promise you it's not like the skincare routine thing where people share their skincare routine, but like nobody's even asked for it, but they just want to share it. Like truly, you guys have been wanting this. You've been wanting more of a long form of what I do on TikTok. I get censored on TikTok, so I'm here to give you guys the piping hot tea without any censorship, and I'm very excited. If you followed my TikTok, you'll know that, I dive into everything from like celebrity scandals to like literally crazy stories about like women from America joining ISIS in North Korea. So it's really a smorgasbord of just things that shock me. And so I'm very excited to bring it to you. And today we are going to be actually talking about one of the things that got me into deep diving, one of the stories that got me into deep diving about a year ago. And this is the case of Armie Hammer. If you haven't been following the Armie Hammer scandal, I will give you the recap. But why it's relevant right now is because Death on the Nile is coming out. And Disney paid $90 million for this movie to happen before the scandal broke. And now they have been doing all sorts of backpedaling to try to make this movie work. And it has been very interesting as an outsider, just seeing all the different tactics and PR things that they're trying to do to make this work. But if you don't know about the Armie Hammer case, over a year ago, it was like January of, 2020, or no, that would have been January of 2021. An anonymous account came out and started shedding light on text messages and different allegations about Armie Hammer. And it wasn't just your standard, very disturbing rape allegations. There was a lot of really, really disturbing text involved with it. And to give you guys an example, there was one alleged text that said, "I am 100% a cannibal." So it was in the vein of a cannibalism fetish. And I'm not here to kink shame anyone, but I think everyone in the BDSM community through this story has felt like it has discredited that community, because the thing with that community is consent is required. So anyway, I'm not here to kink shame anyone, but these kinks were pretty outlandish, and they led to some, what sounded like alleged non-consensual things. So one of his former exes, Paige Lorenz, said he carved an A into her pelvis. She showed photos of it. She went on the news, and what she said was, he wanted to find a doctor that would remove my ribs. He was telling me you can remove the bottom rib so he could smoke them, cook them, and eat them, and he kept saying you don't need them. So it was stuff of that sort of genre of kink, and I think the problem with it was the women felt threatened and pressured and coerced and beyond and worse than that. So after that anonymous account came out, several women came out saying they'd had similar experiences, and it kind of led to just a trickle of information that had us all sitting back and being like, WTF. I personally had a major aversion to the story. If I see even a drop of blood, I will feel very faint. So I didn't want to look into it. My friend Caitlin and her sister Scarlett were like, Lauren, you have to pay attention to this. And also, the family is crazy. There's been a lot of crazy stuff with the family history. So I was like, all right, now you've piqued my interest because this sounds generational. So I was on Reddit. I was, looking through stuff. My friend was like, Lauren, his aunt wrote a book. And I'm like, all right, let me actually look into this. So I found the book. It was called Surviving My Birthright with Casey Hammer, Armie Hammer's aunt, who I'm actually great friends with now. And I ended up reading the book in literally a fever dream, however many hours it took me day, and started posting a multiple part series on TikTok about the family. But to give you an idea, it all started with the industrialist Armie Hammer, who had his own sort of web of craziness going on. Everything from Soviet espionage to, being buddies with presidents, to having a mistress that instead of when his wife found out about her, instead of breaking up with the mistress or leaving his wife, he had the mistress change her name and appearance and gave her a new role within his company. And was like, oh, it's a different person. No, that's not the person I was having the affair with. So crazy stuff like that. Then it trickled down to Julian Hammer, who's Armie Hammer's grandfather. And he was his own, level of crazy. If you read Casey's book, Surviving My Birthright, he at one point handed out his guns at a drug-fueled party where little Casey was like a little girl. handed out his guns like party favors, and everyone started shooting at the walls, and Casey was a young girl. She was frightened, and her dad's like, oh, no, don't be frightened. He hands her a phone book, tells her to hold it over her head, and was going to use her for target practice. And, you know, her brother kind of saved her in that case. And there was another story in the book where Casey got a very strange call from her dad's ex-girlfriend, and they went out to dinner. They come back. The house is completely disheveled. It's been ransacked. For whatever reason, they all go their separate ways in the house. Casey goes outside her bedroom door. Her little teddy bear has been decapitated, has lighter fluid on it. She looks up. Her dad's ex-girlfriend, she didn't know it was her at the time, is in a sheet like a ghost with the eyes cut out, with lipstick smeared on and a sombrero with a butcher's knife in her hand. She chases Casey through the house. It's like the house has been ransacked by a bunch of drugged up people. Her dad was held hostage for a while. So you got to read the book, but the family history is crazy. And then it leads to Armie Hammer's dad, Michael, who, you know, in Vanity Fair outed him for allegedly having this sex throne, which is a 7-foot tall chair. It's got a cage with a hook under it. The seat of the chair has a hole in it. So imagine it's like this throne. The seat of the chair has a hole in it with the family crest on it. And he claimed it was a divorce gift. So it was a very specific and custom divorce gift with that family crest on it. But anyway, this leads to, you know, Armie Hammer now and then everything going on in the media. So that's kind of how I tied into the story. All this comes out. I released that part on TikTok. A documentary company is actually making a documentary about the family, and that's been put out in the media. But if you go through Westwood in LA, you will see a museum that says Hammer on it. That is their family. So, you know, Armie hid his family ties for a very long time. My friend Ryan Bailey was in acting class with Armie. He's a podcast So Bad It's Good with Ryan Bailey. He was in acting class with Armie. Armie never, you know, talked about his family. So anyway, to give you guys kind of an idea of what Armie would have sounded like in a voice note over to a girl, I actually recently had someone send me this voice note. They've never come forward about anything. They want to move on with their life, but, you know, they said, do what you want with this. So it's not the worst we've heard from him, but it will give you an idea, and it hasn't been heard before, of kind of what the nature of some of his stuff was.
All right, buckle your seatbelt. This was going to be the bet. If I won, I get to come over to your house with my bag of goodies. Inside my bag of goodies, there are several different bundles of shibari rope. I don't know if you know what shibari rope is, but shibari is the Japanese art of rope bondage, and it's fucking incredible and fucking beautiful. My bet was going to involve showing up at your place and completely tying you up and incapacitating you, and then being able to do whatever I wanted to every single hole in your body until I was done with you. And until your brain had turned to mush.
So there's a lot about, like, I swear this guy is all about, like, fucking a girl into a vegetative state. Like, that's literally, like, a lot of what his voice memos and text messages are about. And it's just incredibly disturbing. And again, not here to kink shame anyone, but with all the allegations that have come out, it's kind of just, like, a little bit chilling. So anyway, all this comes out. He gets dropped from a few movies. He pulled out of Shotgun Wedding, but I think he would have been dropped. He got dropped from The Godfather. He was replaced by Miles Teller. And then the other one was $1 Billion Spy. He goes to rehab in Florida. And then he comes back. He's back in Grand Cayman. And Grand Cayman is basically like a small town on an island. So when I started putting out these videos, people from Grand Cayman literally started reaching out to me, which is actually insane. But, you know, they're following the story, and they're in this small town, and they see him almost every day. And so he gets back from freaking rehab, and he's at a pool, and suddenly just so happens that there's a photographer at the pool to capture him at the pool with his kids with the tote bag he's carrying that says the name of his rehab on it. Now, if you're sensing my sarcasm, you would be right, because I also got wind that he hired a new PR person that week. I haven't confirm that person, but I will tell you that they live in Montecito, where his parents have had residences, and they're constantly posting things in support of him. And the guy's Twitter reads like a freaking parody, because in one tweet he's saying, "Believe women, I told everyone about Bill Cosby years ago." And in the next tweet it says, "Support Armie Hammer." And it's just like, It's truly just a feast of contradiction looking at his Twitter. So anyway, you know, he's at the pool with that bag. So of course, you know me, I had to look into the rehab. Now, this rehab, it's called the Guest House. It's in Silver Springs, Florida. And online it's listed from anywhere from $48K to $96K per month. This is not somewhere you're using your insurance. This is somewhere only the ultra rich get to go for rehab. So it's online, it's listed as specializing in trauma treatment. The Guest House offers hope and healing from self-destructive behaviors on a beautiful, quiet estate. And I mean, it's truly just, it reads like a literal spa. Like, I gotta tell you guys some more of these things. So it's 52-acre estate near Ocala National Forest in Florida, offers natural beauty with peace, sunshine, and tranquility to create safe space for healing. 7 luxurious guest suites, chef-prepared organic cuisine, a beautiful pool, tree-covered equestrian trails, and every amenity has been carefully designed for guests in the 90-day inpatient treatment programs to feel at home. I mean, honestly, like, if that is you feeling at home, like, that's like me feeling like at vacation. Like, that's like wild. That sounds like the Four Seasons. Like, literally, they said, after a day of soul searching, guests can enjoy the tropical gardens, walking trails, outdoor lounge, gourmet dining, and refreshing pool. The Guest House is a private pay program. So again, you're not using insurance at this place, and also, like, I want to go. It sounds amazing. So anyway, he does all those photos. Then what comes out next, in 2 weeks after the pool photos, 2 weeks after I hear the PR person's present, is that the LAPD investigation. So what comes out 2 weeks after that is that there's an article that says the LAPD investigation has wrapped. Now this is like, imagine like around Christmas time. The LAPD investigation is wrapped, and the article is TMZ saying it's not going to be a favorable outcome for the alleged victim. Now, how they would know that, or how they would know that something that was being sent to the DA, the charges were not likely to be pressed, like, this is just conjecture. So there's some sort of like PR strategy going on here that is all leading up to Death on the Nile. And the way Disney has worked around this is they tried their best to remove him from the trailer, but he is like a main character. They didn't have a premiere. And on the movie posters, I haven't seen him on many of them. I think he might have been on a bus that passed me, but I did see one photo somebody sent me where they strategically placed 2 headless mannequins in front of Gal Gadot and Armie Hammer, like, just to like block them out. So Disney is doing everything they can to just sort of try to, you know, cover up the fact that Armie is in this movie. And what's interesting is, you know, obviously the relations between China and the US are not necessarily like the most wonderful. So there's apparently been like a tightening on restrictions in China of what US films will be aired in China. But you want to know the only US film that's going to be airing in China, at least in the foreseeable calendar? Death on the Nile. And my theory on that is Disney is working hard to get their money back. The Armie Hammer scandal is not as widely known in China. People that would be boycotting here, like in China, like, it might not be as big of news overseas. He might not be as big of an actor. So it's just one of those things. It's very unfortunate. I'm a huge Agatha Christie fan. When I was in Turkey, I stayed at something called the Para Palace, where she wrote Murder on the Orient Express. It's where all the Orient Express riders would stay. It was like this amazing hotel. Hemingway wrote there. It was such a cool place. And I have to think that Agatha Christie is rolling over in her grave. You know, I really think she is. And it's the kind of movie I would want to go see. It makes you feel like you're on vacation. You get this old world sort of travel element. It's everything I like. So I'm very, very disappointed. But Armie is not alone in, you know, what goes on in the media, because you have Ansel Elgort, who was in West Side Story. You know, there were allegations about him with a minor. You have, you know, Chris Noth, and in Just Like That, you have Marilyn Manson, who's working on Donda with Kanye West. You have so many people. And one of the other people I wanted to mention was Nat Turner. So Nat Turner was a director on Birth of a Nation, which Armie was in. Went to all the independent festivals, and it was slated to be this amazing, amazing film. And so what ends up happening is, right as that's happening, so I'll read you guys what came out. So Parker and co-writer John McGinney Celestine, sorry if I butchered that, you guys, but had been charged with rape in 1999 while students at Penn State University. Parker was acquitted in 2001, while Celestine was convicted of sexual assault. The latter's conviction was overturned on appeal in 2005. The alleged victim killed herself in 2012. So I think that's something that we have to like bear in mind, and I think that's something people really miss is like they think of the promising young man element of it, but they don't realize that having these people in the media and having them just go on with their lives is normal when you have the other party that's so traumatized and dealing with PTSD every day and probably not having normal relations with men and all these awful things is having to see their, perpetrator on TV in the media. That's why I think it's important to talk about these things. But I think what's interesting about the Nat Turner thing is he was an actor before he was a director, but he is behind the screen, so people forget about him. And he just gets to go on, and he made a film with Spike Lee called American Skin. And they're actually just getting sued because there's a movie called A Routine Stop that thinks that, there was like some sort of copyright infringement. So there's like a lawsuit out there. The last I heard, it was in October, was the last news article. So we'll keep our finger on the pulse of that one. But, Nat Parker, this woman that he allegedly raped, has committed suicide. It comes out, Birth of the Nation flops, right? But now he's back on other movies. And I don't know what the reparations are, but I think it's not for me to decide. I think that, the media should have an understanding of what works for victims, what works for these victims of these, allegations and what goes on, because I think it would just be so traumatic to know, or to have to see a visual of somebody that, assaulted me if it were me. So it's just crazy. But another really, really interesting point is that, Armie Hammer and Prince Andrew have the same lawyer. And I just think that's really an interesting birds of a feather flock together moment. So anyway, the latest to come out, I'm going to read you guys this off my phone because this literally came up when I was getting ready to record, and it's like a breaking news story the week that Death of a Nile is coming out. Now, are you guys following along with me here? Because are you seeing the cadence of the way these stories are released? Like, even if this isn't a PR story, and even if this has been going on for months, there was a choice to release this information this week, right before Death on the Nile, because we are now pushing the Armie as a family man narrative. Give me a break. Then why did his wife's brother have to fly out this week when she was away to watch the kids? Anyway. So the article reads, this is on People. Armie Hammer and estranged wife Elizabeth Chambers are slowly figuring things out as a couple. Elizabeth always loved him, a source tells People. So it says, Elizabeth's priority has always been her children and their well-being. The past year hasn't been easy, but she and Armie have always had love for each other, a source tells People. They're slowly figuring things out as a couple, but being parents to their 2 kids will always come first. And then another source tells People that Elizabeth has always loved him. He is the real love of her life. They obviously had a lot of issues, but Armie's rehab stay showed that he was committed to big changes. They get along and enjoy hanging out with the kids. So there you have it. I mean, right before Death on the Nile. And, stay tuned, you guys. I'm going to do more of a long form on the family and the nitty-gritty of that when the documentary comes out. Casey Hammer can't, do anything until then with me, but she will be here first. So buckle up, because that's going to be a wild episode, and I can't wait to share more of a long form thing with you. But for the meantime, we will be keeping our eyes on Mr. Hammer and what's going on there. So just crazy. The second topic I want to jump into is the Secrets of Playboy. And if you haven't seen the Secrets of Playboy, it's on A&E. It's an amazing, amazing, amazing docuseries. It's going to be 10 parts. And, it just really pulled the curtain behind Playboy, because we all grew up watching The Girls Next Door. And for whatever reason, the edit on The Girls Next Door made Hugh Hefner seem like he was like a kindly grandfather, like just sweet spirit, which is literally like the craziest edit you could put on Hugh Hefner, because like when you really think about what Hugh Hefner like did for a living and what he created, like why we would like perceive Hugh Hefner as this kindly grandfather person, like is actually insane. And so anyway, the series is just so amazing. You have some of the girls next door that are in it. You have Holly Madison, you have Bridget Marquette. They're both in it. Kendra Wilkinson is not, and I've done some reading as to why, and I think she just wants to move on with her life and like leave the past in the past. And I think she's a real estate agent now. So she wants to leave the past in the past. And then you have former girlfriends that talk, that literally the craziest thing when you're watching this is there are girlfriends that are like 70 years old, and there are girlfriends that are like 35 years old. And like, it's just like, he dated like younger and younger women as he got older, and it was just like the age of his girlfriends never changed as he got older. It's just so crazy. So you see some women that could be the grandmother of the other girls he's dated. It's truly just like mind-boggling. So basically they give you a picture of what the Playboy Mansion was really like. So Hugh Hefner would have these parties, and he would intentionally invite media people so that if there was going to be a story that was going to break about him, he had his entire place not only with cameras everywhere, but with audio everywhere. So he would have these parties and get dirt on everyone, just like a Jeffrey Epstein. And so if there was a story that was about to break about him, he always kind of had his finger on the pulse of what was going on, and he would catch wind of it, and he'd be like, oh, let me go into my database of photos with everyone doing incriminating things. You work for whatever media publication. You want to release this? Okay, cool. Well, I'll be releasing this photo of you. And I have some dirt on you. And then stories would never see the light of day. So this was particularly a problem, too, for the women, because if they were living in the mansion and they had an issue with Hugh, they weren't able to speak freely because they were being recorded on camera, and he was checking those cameras, and he knew what was going on at all times. So one of the women that spoke out was a woman named Jennifer Saganor, and she actually grew up living in the mansion as a child. Her father was Hugh's personal physician. And I mean, it's just such a crazy situation, because even the relationship between the two of them is kind of seeming like it might have been a romance. And I think that's slowly coming out. But Jennifer spends her entire upbringing like opening doors and like being like, I'm 6 years old and here's an orgy in front of me, just absolutely like crazy, crazy stuff. So by the time she's 15 years old, she falls in love with one of Hugh Hefner's girlfriends. And in the documentary, they call her Kendall, but we don't know who it is. We don't know her real name, none of that. So Kendall and Jennifer start hooking up, and Jennifer is underage. She's a 15-year-old girl. And everyone knows about this. The butler recounts bringing them daiquiris in bed, and it's a confirmed thing. So what happened was Hugh Hefner caught wind of it because of his cameras and all of his, recording devices. And he, one night, pulls Jennifer into his room with Kendall. I'm putting that in air quotes. And, he has them in bed, and then Kendall runs into the bathroom and cries because she clearly doesn't want to be involved in whatever menage a trois Mr. Hefner is trying to arrange. So fast forward years later, Hugh Hefner, Jennifer Saganor writes this book, and it was called Playground. And she was very, very kind to Hugh, because Hugh had this like mafia-like persona where you couldn't cross him when he was alive, or he would have made you pay for it. He would have gotten things shut down. Again, he had dirt on everyone from his parties. So Jennifer Saganor, she writes this book. She does her press in LA. She's going to do her press in New York. Hugh Hefner calls her. He goes, hey, Jennifer, I would really appreciate it if you don't tell anyone that I knew about your relationship with Kendall, the girlfriend that happened underage. She goes, yeah, Hugh, no worries at all. Then he's like, okay, and fax over what press you're doing in New York. I want to know who you're interviewing with. She gets on the plane, she goes to New York after sending Hugh, her interviews that are going to be happening. And one by one, every interview gets canceled because Hugh Hefner has his hand in everyone's pocket, to the point where he was hiring Beverly Hills and LAPD to do security for his parties. He had himself covered. So anyway, the Jennifer Saganor of it is very, very interesting. And the way that Hugh and her dad designed the breakup between her and Kendall was they arranged for her to, as a 15-year-old girl, to walk in on them having sex with Jennifer, or the girl Kendall, another girlfriend, and the two of them. So it was like a group sex thing. Could you imagine your father arranging that for you? First of all, you're having an underage relationship he knows about with somebody that, is an adult. and then to design a heartbreaking situation for you by having you walk in on crazy group sex, I mean, that is beyond fucked up. So other things that came out in the documentary, some really weird shit, you guys. Bestiality. Really gross, really fucking weird. But I'm sure you guys all know Linda Lovelace from Deep Throat, and there's allegations that Hugh Hefner made her give a blowjob to a German Shepherd in front of his friends. And it's in the documentary. This is not like, it sounds like, it reads like a freaking conspiracy theory. It reads like a crazy, like, QAnon conspiracy theory when I'm hearing these things. But like, there was that allegation. And then another girlfriend, her name was Sandra Theodore, was like, oh yeah, one time I saw him doing something with my dog. He's like, oh, I was just goofing off. It was like a one-time thing. And she never left him with the dog alone ever again. But I'm like, I would have taken the dog and like gone to the police and been like, I will never see you again. You belong behind bars. Like, this dude was clearly like, had no bounds with how creepy or fucked up he was, from what we're seeing in this documentary. So the other element was the Playboy Bunny clubs. Everyone had to have a key. There were clubs all over the nation. And I mean, there was a lot of brutality within the clubs in terms of like the women were weighed every month. The costumes were not comfortable. They had to do this thing called the bunny dip. It was not comfortable. And the women were protected inside of the clubs. Men were not allowed to touch or date them. But that didn't protect them when they were walking to the car. That didn't protect them if they were out and about, you know, at another party and somebody saw them and knew they were a Playboy bunny. So there was definitely an air of protection inside of the clubs, but not outside of the clubs. And the other thing is, none of the rules applied for the VIPs, and the girls were encouraged to entertain the VIPs in a very different way than they would other members. So there was one story about Don Cornelius of Soul Train. And so Don Cornelius told these two women, oh, you guys want to come to a party at my house? They were sisters. They were like 20 and 21. He drugged them. He tied them up. There was no party at his house. He had them in two separate rooms, and he was sodomizing them with wooden objects, and they could hear each other screaming from the opposing rooms. And the people at the Playboy Club were like, where are they? We haven't heard from them in a few days. One of the girls got herself out of the bindings and called the house bunny. They had these like house mothers. Hugh Hefner's security picked these two girls up. So Hugh Hefner knew what was going on. He read the security reports every day. Hugh Hefner's guy picks them up. They were not allowed to go to the hospital. They were not allowed to go to the police. The house bunny was responsible for getting them taken care of because the marketing machine that was Playboy did not want anything like this attached to their name. So there were many stories like this that never saw the light of day. And Don Cornelius, being a VIP client after he did this awful thing to these two very young girls, he was back at the Playboy Club the next week, which is just so crazy to me. And this wasn't the only instance. There was a resort in Great Gorge, New Jersey. These guys came in. They pretended to be bigwig directors. The girls thought they were VIP clients. They're like, hey, come up to our little cabin in the woods. They went there as a group. They were told they were going to be in a Hollywood film. And before you victim blame and think these girls were naive, they were going in a group. There's a perceived sense of safety in a group. They were told these guys were VIPs. They go up there, they get tied up, they get drugged, they get filmed, they get brutalized. 3 days later, they're released, and the guys tell them, if you ever tell anyone, we have footage of you, we will ruin your lives. So what ends up happening is it gets out within the girls that are working at the Playboy Club, and the guys ended up getting charged. This was one of the only instances where people were charged, but just absolutely sick stuff, which led me to some research that I did not see in the documentary, and it absolutely horrified me. And it has to do with Brooke Shields. So Brooke Shields, 10 years old, from the time she was a baby, her mother, who was a single mom, thought that Brooke should be a star, thought that Brooke was the most beautiful child in the world. And so she was approached by a photographer named Gary Gross, and Playboy had an affiliate magazine called Sugar and Spice that was supposed to be like a toned down Playboy. And they had a section in Sugar and Spice called Nymphettes, which, by the way, is a reference from the movie or the book Lolita, which is about pedophilia. So in this Nymphettes section, they would have girls that were like 10 or 12 or 9 in full makeup like an adult, but fully nude. and it was fully nude photos of these young girls. And they were supposed to be artful. I don't know how anyone would be picking up something related to Playboy, looking for some form of art. So that was a little confusing to me. So anyway, this guy, Gary Gross, who I looked him up, he's no longer with us, or else I'd be, sending like a glitter bomb to his house or something. So Gary Gross, he's dead. And very apt last name. So he approaches Brooke Shields' mom. He's like, I want to put Brooke Shields in Sugar and Spice. She's going to be in the nymphettes section. So at 10 years old, Brooke Shields poses for nymphettes. The photos are not available online, thank God. I'm sure there are creeps in the world that have them. You can see the pictures of like her face and her collarbone, so you can see that she was wearing very, very, very adult makeup. She is wearing like heavy, heavy makeup to be made to look like more of a mature face. I mean, honestly. And then, she's completely naked, slicked up in oil, in bathtubs and in various sort of like bathtub scenes. So this comes out, and this is a completely normal thing to people, I guess. So a year later, her mom tries to sue for these photos, because Brooke's star was rising and she was starting to get put in some movies and stuff. And I think maybe her mom was having some regrets about letting Brooke do this. So the judge says only a perverse mind would see these photos in that light. And it's like, dude, there are perverse minds everywhere. That's why you protect children. That's why you don't allow children to be in a publication like this. Like, only a creep would be picking this magazine up, not somebody who's like, look at this amazing artful photo of a 10-year-old. Like, that's not what those magazines were for. That was a loophole for those magazines to get out there into the hands of creeps who I'm sure bought them by the frickin' boatload, because it seemed like it was a recurring, it was a recurring insert in this magazine, meaning it had been going on for a long time, and people that weren't as famous as Brooke Shields were subjected to these photos that we'll never even know about. And at 10 years old, you cannot consent to doing something like that, and you should have adults in your life protecting you from doing something like that. So it's just really dark. And then Brooke Shields played like a 10-year-old prostitute in the movie Pretty Baby, where literally at 10 years old, she had a scene where she was pretending to seduce an older man on a bed. And then fast forward a few years, she's doing Blue Lagoon, where she has plenty of nude scenes, which I'm told were, body doubles, but still, it's just a case of like a young girl being sexualized at such a young age and not being protected by adults in her life. And, Playboy had something to do with Sugar and Spice. And that to me is like one of the sickest things. And I'm not sure why it's not talked about more, but it's honestly crazy. So one of the other things that happened in the documentary, just circling back to Holly Madison, is she realized she was neurodivergent. And so she was wondering, like, she had trouble fitting in during high school, and she had trouble with guys her own age. So when she started dating Hugh, she was like, well, maybe an older guy will be better. She liked the family aspect of the Playboy Mansion. And even with fame, she felt like some sort of connection with people. And she came to realize later that she was neurodivergent. She's somewhere on the scale with Asperger's and autism. She hasn't really revealed that, but she said something to that effect. And so anyway, like, it makes sense as to why she was searching for this connection that she had trouble making. So anyway, she speaks about Hugh. She speaks about how the women were pitted against each other. And what ends up happening is Holly Madison finally is the sole playmate, which if you watch The Girls Next Door, she wanted to marry him. You know that she wanted to be his only girl. And once she finally got to that point, she realized that Hugh was the problem, and that he was pitting her against the other girls, and that he was creating the drama, and he liked to create the drama around himself. And the other thing that Holly Madison said was, when people were in various states of drunkenness, Hugh would, even just the playmates, get a lot of different photos of them that they knew existed, and he did that intentionally. There was always some sort of blackmail over their heads. And so she puts this out in the press that she was always worried about leaving because of those photos. And what ends up happening is Crystal Hefner, who was Hugh's last wife, former playmate, she comes out and says, I found them when he passed, I destroyed them all. And there were thousands of them. So the documentary is amazing. Definitely watch it. And, you know, it starts to paint a picture of Playboy sort of as this insane marketing machine wherein there were lots of bad things going on under the surface, but everything was handled internally. They kept the police out of it. They kept the media out of it. And it enabled them to keep their sterling silver facade. It enabled them to have a show like The Girls Next Door where Hugh Hefner was like this kindly grandfather. Meanwhile, like he's the biggest creep of all time. So it's just kind of crazy how we can perceive things in the media and how things are portrayed in a certain manner, but what's going on behind the scenes is very different. And I think, you know, that's a lot of what we're going to be covering in this podcast. So I really look forward to sharing more with you guys. Thank you so much for listening, and I will see you next time.